Hi friends, my name is Amok Thakur and today on World Photography Day, SBI General Insurance brings you this session on mobile photography where I will be talking about some basic rules of photography, some do's and don'ts while taking pictures and some tips and tricks to help you take even better pictures during your vacation. 19th August every year is celebrated as World Photography Day because it was on this day in the year 1839 the French government bought the patent for the only photography process then and gave it as a gift free to the world. In the photography world, it's commonly believed that digital SLR cameras are the ones that revolutionized photography and made it accessible to a larger audience. But if you actually look at it, it's the phone camera that made photography accessible to a far wider audience and made it accessible to people. Today, in this presentation and the session, I'm going to show you different images shot on various different kinds of phone cameras, which will tell you that it doesn't matter what kind of camera or what kind of phone camera you're using, but as long as you follow all the rules, the tips and tricks, the basic do's and don'ts, you will get a great picture. Even though we are talking about mobile photography today, do remember at the end of the day, it's photography. So your mobile phone camera has to be shown the same respect you would show your DSLR camera. So first things first, your lens has to be absolutely clean. You can use any cloth that you use to clean your goggles, your spectacles. That same cloth can be used to keep the lens clean. Just wipe the lens clean and you're good to go. Very often I have seen people use just one hand to hold their camera and take the picture with the other hand. This leads to shaking of the camera and changing of the composition and you get unsharp images. The best way to hold your mobile phone camera is with both your hands and using either the thumb or the index finger to take pictures. Now the things to keep in mind while taking a picture are composition, light and subject. There are different kinds of compositions, namely the rule of thirds, frame within a frame, symmetry, leading lines and perspective. The first rule of composition, the rule of thirds, which means your entire picture is divided ideally into 9 parts, equal parts, and your main subject has to occupy 1/3 of the frame, leaving 2/3 of the frame empty. For example, here the baby is occupying 1/3 of the picture and 2/3 of the frame is empty, following the rule of thirds. Similarly, here as well, the baby is occupying 1/3 of the frame, whereas 2/3 is empty, following the rule of thirds. Again, we see the coconut salesman on the right of the frame, occupying 1/3 of the frame, leaving 2/3 empty, following the rule of thirds. Now here is an example wherein the rule of thirds is applied, but at the bottom of the frame. It's not only on the right or the left of the frame, but we can use it similarly at the bottom and top as well. So here your subject is in the bottom 1/3 of the frame, whereas the top 2/3 is empty, following the rule of thirds. Here again the child is on the left of the frame, left corner, occupying 1/3 of the frame, leaving 2/3 empty, following the rule of thirds. This as well, the child is on the bottom of the frame, following the rule of thirds. Now we move on to the next rule of composition, which is frame within a frame. A frame within a frame is a great way of creating context for the picture and leading the viewer's eye straight to the subject. This is an example of frame within a frame where this arch is framing the entire picture and leads the eye gradually towards the center and giving it depth and context. For example, here the baby and the nurse are framed by the window and the curtain, giving it some context as to the place. Here the piano player is framed by the piano, giving it a very interesting perspective and giving it depth as well. Here we see the monk walking in the temple, but these leaves give it a finite position. You know that there are a lot of trees in the compound, in the complex, and that's conveyed very well with the framing. Here also the trees and the leaves are framing the picture nicely and your eye gradually is drawn towards the main pool. These are few examples of frame within a frame kind of composition. Now the next rule of composition that we are going to talk about is symmetry. Now naturally the human brain is wired in such a way that we appreciate symmetry. For example, Brad Pitt and Aishwarya Rai. Both these people have exactly symmetrical faces, which means their left side of the face is an exact replica of the right side of the face. Now we will see some examples of symmetrical composition. As you see here, we have a diagonal line going across the frame and we have absolutely symmetrical lines going, which gives it a very symmetrical design in the frame. Here as well, we have the cloud and the bush complementing each other, plus we have the horizontal lines and we have a symmetrical pattern. So everything is very geometric and symmetrical in the frame. Here as well, we see the reflection is an exact replica of the top half of the frame, which makes it an exactly symmetrical frame. Now this is a slightly unusual symmetrical frame where you can see symmetry in replication, where you have Xerox written here and Xerox written here as well. You have the two people getting shaved, one person is looking on this side and the other person is looking on the other side. So it's an exact mirror image but vertically, which is also a very interesting way of showing symmetry. Now the next rule of composition that we're going to talk about and see some examples of is leading lines, which means in the frame you compose it in such a way that there are certain visual lines leading up to the main subject of the picture. Here are some examples for leading lines. Now in this picture, what's happening is the lines on the tiles are leading you to the scooter. The door is opened in a slightly diagonal manner, wherein the door and the leaves are leading you to the person in the picture. Here as well, the shadow lines, the shadow here and the piece of cloth here is leading you to the baby. This is a very interesting example wherein you have a lot of leading lines. You have just everything right from this diagonal line to the design on the glass to the shadow. Everything is just leading the viewer's eye into the picture onto the face. This is another example wherein you have these leading lines, some leading lines here, leading lines here. Automatically the viewer's eye is leading right to the person and then leading onto the background. Another architectural example of leading lines wherein you have these lines on the floor leading you into the picture. You have these arches leading you into the picture. Another architectural example of leading lines wherein these lines on the floor are leading you to the temple, the clouds in some manner are leading you to the temple, and so is the tree. So as many leading lines as you have, automatically the eye will go onto the main subject. Now the last rule of composition that we'll see today and some examples of is perspective. I feel using an unusual perspective to take a picture really helps enhance the image a lot. For example, here you see these two kids. If you would have taken the picture at eye level, just the two kids there hugging it would have made a nice picture. But the moment you go slightly higher and give it a very unusual perspective where people are not usually see it like this, it makes it very interesting. Here also I have gone really close to the baby's face, giving an unusual visual to the baby's face. Here as well, gone really close to the face, which enhances his features like the mustache, the wrinkles, the texture on the turban. It just makes it really nice and feels you're right there in the moment. Photography means writing with light, and with our sun we have lots and lots of that. Let's divide natural light into two main parts. One is window light, which can give you light for nice, lovely, dramatic portraits, and the natural light which is outdoors. Let's see some examples and see a demo. Window light is my favorite kind of light because it gives you the opportunity to do various kind of dramatic portraits. Let's see some examples and I'll also do a demo. Now guys, to demonstrate some window light portraits, I would like to invite my friend Arjun, who's going to help us, and we're going to demonstrate some lovely ways of doing window light portraits for you. Okay guys, now we are here next to this lovely big French window, which is going to be our main light source for the window light portrait, and I'm going to show you some interesting ways of doing window light portraits with it. Arjun, can you just slightly turn towards the light, fold your arms, yeah, face straighter, yeah. Now here we see a lovely triangle forming of highlight and the rest of the face is in shadow. Now that's a classic Rembrandt lighting. Now we have our camera turned on, Arjun's already in his position. Let's start the 3x3 grid, go to the settings, go to grid, turn on 3x3. This is the grid that we saw during the composition. Now we have, if we compose him like this will be the rule of thirds, but for a portrait here, this looks nicer when the person is smack in the middle of the frame and slightly lower angle, which gives the person a position of power. Now we keep him in the center of the frame. Arjun, slight smile please, little more, and take a picture. That's how it looks. Friends, after seeing a classic example of a Rembrandt style window light portrait, let's go outside and see some examples of natural light. For a natural light photography situations, we just have one light source, which is the sun. But the beautiful part about the sun is that depending on the time of the day, it gives us a wide array of lighting situations to take great pictures in. Let's see some examples. Now this is an example of a morning light situation wherein you have nice crisp light coming in, creating a lot of shadows and highlights and a lot of drama. This is an outdoor portrait, which is a Rembrandt light situation, which is a more softer Rembrandt as compared to the demo that we saw with the window light portrait. This is creating a flare creatively. If you have the flare or the light source behind the subject and have the light source in the corner of the frame, it gives you a lovely flare and creates a lot more drama in the picture. This is a soft wraparound light which generally happens on an overcast day. This is very good for taking pictures of babies and kids. This is evening soft light, which is there for a very short time right after the sunset. It's called the golden period. It has lovely colors and it gives you a beautiful light for the skin. When I'm traveling with my family to exotic locations or to a completely new topographical area, one of my favorite pictures to take are the panoramas. Let's see some examples and I'll share some tips and tricks of how to take a panorama. Now this panorama was shot right after the sunset during the golden light period. Now unfortunately the golden light doesn't last for too long, so you have to be very careful and fast while shooting the panorama. This was just before the sunset, so you can see the color difference, the quality of light difference that just 15-20 minutes can make while taking a picture. This is a cityscape panorama. Now you can see a lot of banding which happens in the sky. Now this banding occurs because you're moving the camera too fast and the camera is not able to capture properly the pixels and stitch it together. Now to reduce that or avoid that, I would suggest holding the camera with both your hands, keep it straight and steady, and gradually move the camera to stitch the panorama. Like this, where you will not get any banding. So another example of landscape panoramas. Lovely morning light. I love taking pictures in dramatic lighting situations, so it gives you an entire experience of actually being in the place. Now after shooting all the pictures and just before putting your pictures onto Instagram or your Facebook or sharing it with friends, I'm sure all of you love using all the filters that you have. I'm going to show you some examples of effectively using filters and making the picture much more dramatic. Now this is a picture of a coconut seller that I took on the streets of Kolkata. I really liked the picture because it told a story, it had dramatic lighting, but there was some soul missing in the picture. But the moment I made it into black and white, it just opened up an entire array of emotions where there's far more deeper story to it. It's a lot more dramatic lighting, and I just like it far better than the color pictures. So I always try and see if my black and white pictures, how they look after I shoot the pictures. Now this is a picture that my wife took of me. It was a wide composition, you can see a lot more things. I just cropped the image a little bit, made it into a square, and it just adds so much to the image. I've removed all the unnecessary surroundings and the concentration is just on the wings and me and the composition. I changed the color temperature a little bit, added slight bit of a dark vignette. This is all filters available on your phone and it just makes the picture far more surreal, far more dramatic. This is a picture that I took of autumn leaves, which was okay, looked interesting pattern, got a little bit of negative space, but it was lacking some punch onto it. So what I did was, I just opened up the shadows, pulled back the highlights, and just gave me a completely different image after doing these two filters. Nowadays with our mobile phones and the Instagram accounts and Facebook, I'm sure all of us love to take selfies. Let's just see some tips and tricks on how you can take a nice selfie. Now this is an example of a group selfie. What I've realized is a lot of times when I'm taking selfies with my friends like this, a lot of my friends get hidden behind each other and everybody's faces are not seen. So what I generally do is, I just lift the camera slightly higher, which gives it a little more perspective, which is a very good composition technique as well, and everybody's faces is seen very well. This is an example of a selfie with another friend of mine, where I've realized if you take a selfie with the camera straight vis-a-vis if you take a selfie with the camera on the side, there's a slight bit of a distortion that you see when it's horizontal. So if you compare the two pictures, both of us look much better in the vertical in this shot as compared to the other one. I prefer taking selfies with a vertical camera, just slims you down a little. Let's look at some tips and tricks to get really arty looking pictures. I'm sure in our lives all of us have taken thousands of pictures of flowers and all of us are really intrigued with what's really happening inside the flower. So what do? We just use our two fingers and just zoom in. Now that's not the right way to do it. I like going physically closer to the flower because I'm optically zooming in and not just digitally. What happens in a digital zoom is the pixels get recreated or the pixels are expanded, because of which you get a pixelated or a blurry image. If you physically go closer to the flower, or if whenever you want to take a close-up, you go physically close to the subject, it's an optical zoom and gives you a far better image quality. Another trick which I really like is I shoot reflections and then I just flip them around. So it gives you a very unnatural, unrealistic looking image because not everybody is looking at reflections upside down or rather downside up. Always look up and down. Whenever you are going, wherever you are moving around, if you see a good image in front of you, be rest assured there is a good image behind you. At the same time, don't forget to look up or down because I can guarantee that most of the times there are great images happening all over the place. Now this is an example of looking straight in. This is also a nice image with leading lines going in, a lot of geometric patterns happening. But the moment I look down, I see a far more stronger image and a far more architecturally driven image. Always fill the frame. It's a good idea to fill the frame, especially for leaves, different colorful leaves. I really like doing that. Even for architecture photography, I like at times just going, because the buildings a lot of times have very interesting patterns which you can capture. Even for people photography, just go in as close as you can and it just gives you a great image. I can see a lot of people asking a lot of questions about photography and photography career, etc. So let me just go through some questions and let's do a Q&A session. Okay. So the first question is, what is the best camera for beginners? Actually, I feel for beginners, any camera is good enough because at the end of the day, you're learning. But my advice to beginners or learners or people who are learning photography is avoid the program mode, shoot manual. So if you're using a DSLR, don't go to aperture priority or program mode, shoot with the manual setting. That's when you will learn your exposure and it will help you in the longer run. Okay, now the next question is how to clean your camera properly. Cleaning your camera, I would suggest you don't do it yourself, other than maybe wiping it from the outside or exterior, just getting rid of the dust. But if you are getting dust spots on your CCD or on your lens, I would recommend taking it to a service center. There are lots of authorized service centers around the country, and I would recommend you take them to a service center and let the service center people handle the cleaning of the camera. That's good for it. The next question is, how can I take pictures in less or dim light? Now this is a very valid question, because keeping in mind that people take a lot of pictures during birthday parties, or when you are traveling, you go to a nice romantic restaurant and you want to take a picture or you want to take a selfie. I've found that nowadays most of the cameras that are there in the cell phones, all of them have very low light thresholds. So predominantly most of the cameras in the cell phones will take a good picture, especially in the selfie mode, because a lot of people do take selfies in restaurants during birthdays. So I think a lot of phone manufacturers have made their or upgraded their cameras to a point wherein they fare really well in low light situations. The next question is a very valid question. While traveling, what are the do's and the don'ts to be followed? When I'm traveling, I definitely make sure that my camera phone definitely has a casing on it. I do make sure that it has a screen guard and a casing, because when you're traveling, if you're walking or if you're trekking, if you trip and the camera falls or the phone falls, you don't want it to get damaged. So that is something which I definitely follow. I will make sure that my lens stays clean, like how I showed you earlier in the video. Just carry a handkerchief or the cloth that you use to clean your glasses and your specs. Just use that to clean the lens. It will give you good pictures. Another thing that you can do is, whenever you're taking pictures looking in one direction, always look around, because when you're traveling, you're at a scenic spot, I'm sure there are a lot of things happening around. So make sure that you look around a lot and just shoot as much as you can, because on cell phones, we just have unlimited shooting capacity. The next question is very valid, and I'm sure a lot of you have had the same problem. This person asks that, how can I reduce the red eye when I'm taking portrait pictures with flash? The best way to reduce red eye while taking pictures with flash is that go to the flash settings. There is an icon with the flash symbol and an eye icon right next to it. Now that is for red eye reduction. What that facility does is that the flash will blink for a few times for the eye to compensate for that light which is going to come in, and then take a picture. So what happens is the iris readjusts of the eye, and then you can take a picture and you don't get a red eye. It works beautifully. Friends, now to sum up the mobile photography session, be safe, keep your camera safe, take lots and lots of pictures, follow all the do's and don'ts and tips and tricks that I have shared with you guys, and I'm sure you will have great pictures and great memories from all your travels. Travel more, shoot more, and be safe with SBI General Travel Insurance.